Hello and welcome back to Bethel Evangelical Free Church on YouTube. I'm in the church bookshop this morning because I want to talk about a book, one of the most important and influential Christian books ever, and certainly from the time of the Reformation. It's Martin Luther's commentary on the Galatians, and of all the books produced at the time of the Reformation, and the Reformation was a great outpouring of literature, when there were books written on every book of the Bible, commentary as systematic theology, as treatises on such things as Christian liberty. But this book stands out. It was John Bunyan's favourite book. He says this in it: "I do prefer this book of Martin Luther upon the Galatians, excepting the Holy Bible, before all books that I have ever seen as most fit for a wounded conscience." Charles Spurgeon, in his catalogue of commentaries, says this is a great historic work and is beyond criticism on account of its great usefulness. It played an enormous part in the conversion of Charles Wesley. It was at a small group meeting where he heard the preface to this commentary, Martin Luther's preface, being read, that Charles Wesley came to that assurance of salvation. And Thomas Charles, a later evangelical, late 18th, early 19th century, says, shortly after his conversion, that Luther's exposition of Galatians 1:4 was very much and particularly blessed to me, as it has been many times since. So this is an immensely influential book, and Luther writes this work particularly to those with afflicted and troubled consciences. He says, writing in his preface, "I myself can scarcely believe that I was so plentiful in words when I did expound this epistle of St. Paul to the Galatians, as this book showeth me to have been. Notwithstanding, I perceive all the cogitations which I find in this treatise by so great diligence of the brethren gathered together to be mine, so that I must needs confess either all or perhaps more to have been uttered by me in this public treatise." And he tells us that the central point here is salvation by faith, that having begun in the Spirit, we are not made perfect in the flesh, but we press on in the Spirit. That it's not a matter of you get in by faith and you stay in by works. It's a matter of you get in by faith and you stay in by faith. It is a marvellous commentary. And Luther writes concerning the world and this great doctrine of justification by faith. He says, "The greeting of the apostle is strange to the world and was never heard of before the preaching of the gospel. And these two words, grace and peace, comprehend in them whatsoever belongeth to Christianity. Grace releaseth sin, and peace maketh the conscience quiet. The two fiends that torment us are sin and conscience. But Christ hath vanquished these two monsters, and trodden them under foot, both in this world and the world to come. This the world doth not know, and therefore it can teach no certainty of the overcoming of sin, conscience, and death. Only Christians have this kind of doctrine, and are exercised and armed with it, to get victory against sin, despair, and everlasting death. And it is a kind of doctrine neither proceeding of free will, nor invented by the reason or wisdom of man, but given from above. Moreover, these two words, grace and peace, do contain in them the whole sum of Christianity. Grace containeth the remission of sins, peace, a quiet and joyful conscience. But peace of conscience can never be had unless sin be first forgiven. But sin is not forgiven by the fulfilling of the law, for no man is able to satisfy the law. For the law doth rather show sin, accuse and terrify the conscience, declare the wrath of God, and drive to desperation. Much less is sin taken away by the works and inventions of men." And so he goes on through this glorious book, speaking of the grace of God in the gospel of Jesus Christ. He tells us it's impossible that the conscience should be quiet and joyful unless it has peace through grace, that is, through the forgiveness of sins promised in Christ. So Christ saith, My peace I leave unto you, my peace I give unto you, not as the world giveth it, do I give unto you. The peace of this world granteth nothing but the peace of our goods and bodies. So the grace or favour of this world giveth us leave to enjoy our goods, and casteth us not out of our possessions, but in affliction, and in the hour of death the grace and favour of this world cannot help us. They cannot deliver us from affliction, despair, and death. But when the grace and peace of God are in the heart, then is man strong, so that he can neither be cast down with adversity, nor puffed up with prosperity, but walketh on plainly, and keepeth the highway. For he taketh heart and courage in the victory of Christ's death, and the confidence thereof beginneth to reign in his conscience over sin and death, because through him he hath assured forgiveness of his sins, which after he hath once obtained, his conscience is at rest, and by the word of grace is comforted. Well, that's just a short extract. It's a marvellous book, a book to come back to again and again. I can very much see why it was that John Bunyan so loved this book, and so I commend it to you. May God bless you and help you in the understanding of his holy word.